Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Sakura met a mysterious stranger online who changed everything? Episode 1. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. To be able to play any sort of a board game, logically, you'll need two main things: the player and the representing token, also known as the game piece. A game piece is, according to the dictionary, the object the player controls to be able to carry through and play the game. The player, in the process, enjoys the game, if it goes well to his liking. But why wouldn't it, when the token, a mere non-living thing, did not have the ability to object? The player, therefore, was in control. The game piece only follows. In this little game that I was involuntarily playing in, he was the player, and I was his game piece. Instant message. Death has just signed in. Prologue. Positioned furtively beneath the shadowed corner of the blind alley, I stood watching, wholly still and silent, like an unseen predator, waiting sinisterly for its prey. But I wasn't waiting for any prey at the moment. In fact, the prey had actually been the one to come to us. The garrulous rat thought he was running away, when actually he'd been running straight to our little mouse trap, a dead-end path where we had been expecting him. The pathetic creature became too talkative. I knew from the start he was unreliable, but I did not have any more pawns at that moment, so I had no choice but to let the man do the dealings. He turned out unsuccessful in doing so, and if his failure wasn't dealt with quickly, it will soon develop as a threat to us. That was why we were here, dealing with the failure. Please. No. He screamed, wincing as he struggled to get up, only to be kicked back down the concrete floor. Just stop. I smirked, clearly amused by his futile pleas. Surely he wasn't brainless enough to think we'd simply let him off, when he already knew much more than necessary. This is your fault. You brought this up on yourself, one replied. Then, another snickered unsympathetically, and besides, this is way too much fun. I ain't stopping just 'cause you're begging, old man. And with that, they went on with it again. Except for a young lad who didn't seem as amused as the others. He wore an apathetic frown, neither repulsed nor enjoying himself, landing an occasional hit every now and then. While the rest of them swallowed the shallow entertainment brought upon by the old man, this lad showed no emotion. I twitched at his defiant worthlessness. It wasn't his area of interest, but I was paying him, and they were acquaintances. The least he could do was be a little useful. But I had to admit, the boy was interesting, more so than all the others, his utter lack of empathy, his quiet but clear obsession. I smiled, seeing the potential before my very eyes. In any case, I stayed out of the fun, finding it only troublesome to go and join them, and simply satisfied myself with watching from afar, a smile of spiteful amusement forming on my lips as I watched them teach the rat its lesson. Maybe next time he'll learn to keep his mouth shut, but then again, I highly doubt he'll receive a chance of a next time. It won't be long until his lungs stop breathing, and his heart stops beating. Yes, it won't be long now, until we're finished with him. His life was in my hands. I can choose to let him live, or otherwise end his life. I had that kind of power, the power between life and death. I merely watched, pleased where this was going. By now, blood was involved, smearing over the ground, its sickening yet pleasurable aroma reaching my nose. It was then that I took notice of a slight movement, so faint I barely detected it. Simply by my keen instincts, my eyes landed on the dumpster located only a few several feet straight in front of where I presently stood. I eyed it. The others seemed not to have noticed the presence that clearly was out of place. Was it nothing more than a mere animal? A cat, maybe. Or a squirrel? It took a few seconds before I decided to set aside the matter, though not entirely dismissing it. I still kept in mind about that presence, whether it was just an animal or not, and redirected my focus back on the scene before me. I'll be quiet, I promise. Just stop. He begged in vain. But it was an empty plea, one of which was completely ignored. The only reason he was alive until this second was because I had allowed them to have a little fun. Eventually, the fun had to end. "Oh, shut up," piped in a voice, a scowl following shortly afterwards. "That's exactly what your problem is. You're too loud. Too much of a coward." He smirked. "I've had about enough of you." He slashed his knife smoothly across the man's neck, and within the same second the body lay limp and fell to the ground. A typical puddle of blood formed around the lifeless corpse that now lay immobile. The young lad that had stood aside throughout the procedure twitched. A gasp. But it was not mine, nor any of theirs, nor the lad's, but of the person who hid behind the dumpster's shadow. I knew it. Right at that moment, a figure emerged out of the shadows, and bolted for the alley's exit. Ah, shit. She saw us. She had witnessed everything, or at least right from that moment of my suspicion. That old man's noise must have been louder than I assumed, drawing a lass into this isolated alley. I could only stare after her retreating back. "Get her." "No." I spoke for the first time, bringing their chase to an abrupt stop. I appeared slightly out of my hiding spot, though still concealed by the shadow's penumbra, revealing little of my appearance. Confusion and shock was evident in her eyes as she turned and stared back at me. That was her major mistake, and she had no idea. I studied her, taking in her features. Hair, face, eyes, body, height, age. I took note of every part. I'd been right. After all, it was a cat, metaphorically speaking, or maybe only a kitten considering it was nothing more but a young girl. She had curiosity like one to a cat, I mean much too nosy for her own good. "Let her be," I stated. "She's going to the grass." "Oh, would she?" I smirked forebodingly at her, sending a silent message only between us, and the sudden dread in her eyes was enough response, as she went on running. Would she tell anyone? Really? Even if she was daring enough to spy on us, when a normal person would have made a run for it, she won't have enough guts to step up and grasp, especially judging how she suddenly fled away in fright. "No need to rush," I said as I stared upon the little girl, who scurried away, eluding like a terrified cat. True, felines were fast, but it wouldn't take much effort to catch them. She might be just a little more to handle, but her silence was all I was interested in. I only had to be patient, to sit and wait, and watch in silence. She wouldn't know, but my men would be there camouflaged among the grass, watching her every move, ensuring her silence. Then, when the time is right, I'll slither my way to the helpless quarry, catching it, and perhaps killing it. I smiled darkly. She won't be telling anyone. ... But off to my right, the still and motionless sight of the young lad caught my attention. The boy only stared, with empty eyes and attention now rapt, as though he'd found something finally worth his sick and quiet interest. I smirked, knowing the girl would be well taken care of. Team consisting of police officers found dead in the public parking lot just behind the corner street of Burrard and 7th. Mysteriously, no evidence was found, nor any witnesses, despite the fact that it happened near a commercial AR. Click. Hot days with highs of 40, and lows of 34. The same weather will remain for the rest of the week. Another click. Let's jump and slide and holler, hooray. Sylvester, Bugs and Daffy, Taz and Lola too. Tweety's such a sweetie, now all we need is you. And I need a life. A bored rigid girl muttered, namely, me. I'm blaming you, got that? It's your fault I'm a loner right now. A cranky groan was heard from the other line. Well, sorry, my mom had to go to some stupid get-together with my aunt, leaving me to babysit my stupid cousin and run this stupid flower shop on my own. It's so stupid. Exactly. My eyes rolled mechanically at Yamanaka Ino. You should come down here and help me. It'll be fun. Just then, a loud collision, a shattering noise, a shriek, and a burst of wild laughter interrupted. An ear-piercing obscenity followed shortly afterwards. "You brat. I'm gonna kill you." Sounds inviting. I muttered in sarcasm. "Forget it. I prefer TV with pizza, burgers, fries. Yes, anyway. You won't believe what I wore in the gym last Friday." Her shorts were practically her underwear. She didn't want to shoot hoops or dribble. All she did was bend over and the stupid senior jocks would. A big blur of black caught the corner of my eye, and whipping my head towards the window, I saw, still, a blur of black out the window, several meters away from the house. I rolled off the bed from my earlier prone position and still with the phone in hand blasting with Ino's continual blab I walked slowly towards an opened window and glanced out. I saw my typical neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon, nothing out of the ordinary except for the mob of men in black that presently lingered casually on the sidewalk. I tried peering closer, but it was too far to sight anything else. In a flash, I was out of my room then back again to my prior spot with the cordless phone in one hand, and this time, a pair of binoculars in the other. I was looking through the lenses with much curiosity before I even noticed it. Across the street, a few boxes lay arbitrarily across a small portion of the front lawn or the public community center, and 2 or 3 guys were moving them inside the building. Judging from the rather chaotic mess, I thought maybe they were a bunch of older teens moving in for university. There was one located within the city. That, or perhaps they were only helping old, retired seniors planning to use a room in the rec center for aerobics or something. Hello. Earth to Sakura. Do you copy? The imaginary light bulb afloat over my head suddenly ignited with a thought that I undertook without thinking twice, or rather, without thinking about it at all. "I'll call you back." Hurriedly, I rose from the window and changed into white sweatpants and a pale russet tank top. "Wait," wailed Ino on the other line, "where are you going? What could possibly be more important and interesting than moi? Some guys hanging out at the rec." I hung up, and before long, I was out and running. I didn't head straight for the community center, instead I went the opposite direction into the woods. I only wanted to see what was going on, but not exactly be seen. Even though I knew nothing of what I expected to find out in this little scheme of mine, it was nevertheless better than listening to Ino's continual blabbers. It took me a long time to get there after running the long way through and around the woods, and soon I was only yards away from my initial destination. I kept my pace in a light jog, the sight of the house and its surrounding area growing larger by the second. The public community center, also known as the recreational center, was made up of 2 vastly rectangular buildings, each with 4 floors, plus one more mini building that was the human resources, or the office. Like any typical rec center, this one had endless vacant rooms with wide spaces, plus a studio and fitness center and a very relaxing lobby. Unlike any typical rec center, this one had neither a gym nor a field. It had a small park across the road, and an extensive parking lot, but no sports ground, except for the small basketball court pushed up in a corner of the parking lot. One of the reasons I liked my neighborhood was because the rec was only a walking distance from my house, about a 20-minute walk, considering I walked really slow. It gave easy access to the library, which I secretly spent a lot of time in, secretly, since Ino would never let me hear the end of it if she found out. Though I was too far away to see their faces, it didn't take much brains to figure out that they were all guys, fairly young. And no, they were obviously not senior citizens, but they do qualify for high school seniors, if not retired ones. I kept my cool, wanting to give out the impression that I was no one more than a mere jogger, though of course, me staring like a stalker, no blinking at all, did not help emit that image. Surveying the crowd of young men, my gaze gradually fell upon one. Something about him sparked an unnamed emotion within me, but it wasn't the strange sensation that caught me off guard. It was his stance, with his head turned right in my direction. Startled, I ducked futilely, my pathetic attempt to escape his sight, but he must have already seen me. How could he not? In the midst of a deserted sidewalk, I was the only one there, standing out quite noticeably. Suddenly, I felt so stupid, a rush of shame slowly crawling its way up my cheeks in the form of a blush. How long was I standing there like a complete idiot? I fled by slipping into a trail in the woods within the forests, allowing the sky-high set of pine trees to close in behind me. I kept running until I lost track of time and direction, following nothing more than the narrow bike trail etched through the forest ground. Soon enough, just as I started cursing Konoha for its abnormally huge percentage of woodland hence given its name, hidden in the leaves, the wandering trail led me out the forsaken forest, and I found myself standing in a familiar, shop-filled avenue found in the outskirts of downtown. There weren't a lot of people this afternoon, for which I was thankful for at the moment, not having to squeeze through the crowded street like it usually is. Sighing, I started to wander, trusting my instincts to take over and lead me back home. Even though I made a total fool of myself, I have to say it was rather fun, the feeling of being able to see yet not seen. It was exciting, in a really childlike spying sort of way. No, I sharply halted, turning my head in all directions as I tried to search for the sound's source. The scream was so faint that I started to think it was merely imagination. I remained still in an attempt to hear anything more that would prove the sound wasn't only my mind, but seconds passed fruitlessly and my hearing caught only the shoppers, soft chattering as they walked by. I tried to see if anyone else heard it too, but everyone in the boulevard carried on with their own business, too busy with their own lives. Stop. My gaze landed upon a narrow alleyway, and I was almost certain that was where the screams came from. Being the snoop I was, a particular and fairly blatant idea inevitably entered my mind. And despite it going against all protests of my conscious intellect, I proceeded nonetheless, and soon I found myself creeping through the narrow alley. High walls of brick stood parallel on either side in a confined manner. Various objects caused the sun's orange glow to cast strange, alien silhouettes, and not to mention the dark shade of the walls itself, it was like being engulfed by shadows, entering a point of no return as I did the alley. I jumped as clamors and angered yells echoed, but it was unclear and muffled. Anyone would have ran away, and I admit a second earlier I contemplated whether or not to do the same, but the noises only gave me a greater urge to carry on. Actually, it was more of my curiosity overpowering fear. I knew that whatever commotion was going on was happening just on the other end of this alley, and my questions would not subside until I found out what commotion that was. The path twisted on a sharp curve to the right, and a big blue dumpster was positioned just by the angle. Cautiously, I tiptoed towards the metal container and knelt beneath its dark shade. I took a deep breath in before slowly peering around the corner. A small crowd gathered in the middle of the alley, where a third wall lay planted about 5 yards from my current spot, creating a dead end. In the midst of them, a man lay curled up on the ground in a helpless manner, ever so often grunting as a wooden baseball bat came crashing down on his body. The bat struck again and again, its brawny assailant showed no sign of stopping. As if that wasn't excruciating enough, kicks and punches all came raining down upon him at the same time by the surrounding others. I knew that the right thing to do was call for help. But I also knew that even the tiniest movements could draw unwanted attention, especially when one wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. So I stayed still, an act that took no effort, for I was already frozen in place anyway. There were 7 or 8 of them, with faces unseen and enveloped by a hood's shadow. One possessed strange, uncanny markings on his face, while another had his bangs covering most of his. I stared at one individual who'd isolated himself from the rest of them, lingering by the fringes of the brash and eager crowd. I couldn't see his face, not from where I hid, and certainly the hood over his head didn't help bring about a clearer image, but it was his half-hearted motions that caught my eye. While every strike landed upon the old man on the ground was electrified with sick pleasure and satisfaction from the others, this man, this boy, seemed, well, indifferent. Empty. There was something about him, the calmness of his posture, the empty feeling of his fists, his hidden face, just something that didn't quite sit right in my stomach. I turned away before the shivers surfaced. Suddenly, the old man, whom I entirely forgot about for the past few seconds, was slammed hard and loud against the wall in a sudden motion, the raucous collusion startling my inner senses. Turning towards the ruckus, I saw him slowly slop down on the floor. His gray hair, which revealed his elderly age, was now stained with his own blood, and on the wall of which he collided on were smears of the crimson liquid. Its nauseating aroma soon reached my nose. I retched and backed up against the wall. Then, I froze, realizing what I'd just done. Feeling a shriek in my throat that longed to emit, I clasped my mouth, producing a silent, mental scream. I stayed like that, unmoving, for the longest 3 seconds of my life. Then slowly, with caution, I peered once more around the corner. No one had noticed. Good. I took a deep breath and gulped in an attempt to steady my breathing, but hearing the man's frantic pleas only worsened my panic. "I'll be quiet, I promise. Just stop," the old man croaked, miraculously still alive. "Oh, shut up," one of them said mockingly. "That's exactly," the rest of his words were blurred. All I was aware of was the sudden gleam in his hands. A metal, a blade, a knife. To my horror, he slit the old man's throat, who slumped down on the floor, surrounded by a pool of thick blood, his body cold and lifeless. His neck bore a deep gash from where blood leaked freely. By the time I realized it coming, it was already too late to prevent. A gasp involuntarily escaped between my lips, loud enough to attract everyone in the alley. All heads shot to my direction, and one single plan arose in my mind. Run. I was already dashing for the alley's exit by the next second. I heard one of them swore, and yelled, "Get her!" "No," hissed a voice. Then I knew their pursuit after me had ended, the footsteps had stopped. My head turned instinctively, curious to find out who my savior was, and soon I found my gaze falling upon pale eyes, tinted somewhere between old gold and ecru, which seemed to hover in the shadowed corner. Little by little, the person's body materialized out of sheer darkness, and I frowned, realizing my ignorance of his presence until now. Though he stayed in the shadow's partial shade, one of the few visible features was a tattoo near his hand. It was some sort of a squiggle, or a wavy line with a dot one end, or, I had no idea. It was probably only dirt. He stared at me, a glint of determination in his eyes. I wanted to look away, to break this trance he set me in, but no matter how hard I endeavored, I was unable to do so. I felt exposed under his observant gaze, his whitish orbs reading me like an open book. Let her be. The unmistakable malice in his voice made me realize he was no savior. One of the men protested and yelled, "She's going to grass." Initially, going to the police was the last thing I had in mind, the first being to get out of this filthy alley alive, then head straight home. But now, going to the station didn't seem like such a bad idea. But the idea crumbled when his lips curled into a crooked smile and he sneered at me. It was with that single look that he sent his silent word of warning. "No need to rush," I heard his raspy voice say, "she won't be telling anyone." And just like that, I realized going to the cops wasn't only a bad idea, but the worst idea. I tore my eyes away from him, but before I could make my body turn and run out in the edges of my vision, the shifting of a silhouette caught my attention. The inexplicable young man. He turned, slowly, slightly, but enough to capture my being with a single stare from the shadows of his hoodie. His gaze locked onto mine, studying, analyzing, memorizing. The older man in the shadows, the leader of the group, he was scary, intimidating, dangerous. But this boy, a shudder crawled up my spine, he didn't seem human. Finally, I burst out of that clogged up, shadow-devoured alley, but I barely had time to relax until I heard voices back in the passage, sending me sprinting once again. I made sure to take the crowded routes and avoided any isolated streets. The more people to witness, the less they would possibly pursue. As I ran, I realized that I've been doing 4 things routinely in the past afternoon. 1. Snooping around in a business that wasn't my own. 2. Thinking that I wouldn't get caught. 3. Getting caught. And the last one, running away. I should really try and avoid these kinds of mishaps, but old habits die hard, at least, that's what they say. As I fled farther away from the center of the city, the crowds lessened, and soon, as I neared the residence area, only about 2 or 3 persons walked by the streets. I slowed down to walk, positive now that I couldn't have been followed. Nothing more but the typical sounds of the neighborhood filled the atmosphere, soft chatters of the occasional passers, a bark of a dog here and then, the sound of an engine as a car or 2 would drive by, and even the birds chirping, as stereotypical as that may be. Allowing the familiar serenity to calm my nerves, I stopped and bent over, rested my hands on my knees, tired from the long run. Almost as immediately as I halted, something in the corner of my eye did too. I turned around to see a vehicle just on the top of the hill. It was too dark now and too far to even distinguish whether it was a car or van, or what color it was. Something dark, like black, or dark blue or dark red, or just about any dark color there is. Seeing its immobility, I assumed it was parked, but that assumption evaporated when I turned to move forwards and the vehicle did too. I continued walking, and the vehicle continued onwards, driving at such an abnormally slow pace. I frowned and looked back again, motioning with my hands for the car to drive ahead. Any driver with common sense would have overtaken a human walking down the street instead of waiting behind them. I motioned the second time, but the car or van persisted in driving slowly. I shrugged, "Fine, suit yourself." I was tired and my leg muscles ached and burned, so I paused to rest again. The car did too. I looked back, frowning. The little game went on. I would stop, the car would stop, I would go, and the car would go, but it always remained several yards away, which was a smart distance that forbade me from seeing any plate number. I began speed walking, along with my heart, which began speed beating, and with a sudden rush of adrenaline, I broke in a sprint. To my horror, though not much of a surprise, the car roared its engine and drove faster. They followed me. They followed me. The thought repeated over and over. If it weren't for the headlights from the automobile that was on my tail, I wouldn't have seen the path before me. Within a matter of seconds, the end of the street emerged from the shadows. I ran faster, and then took a sharp turn around the corner, instinctively diving in a bush, an act that I saw multiple times in movies. Crouching, hidden, I waited and dreaded at the same time for the vehicle to drive around the corner. After what seemed like hours, the car finally drove around the corner at a slow speed of 10 kilometers per hour in a prying-like manner. It passed me, thankfully not noticing my lurking presence, and drove further down the block, stopping in front of an old 2-story house. I waited in anxiety. Perhaps they thought that the house was mine. A part of me was thankful that I presumed that they were the men from the alley. Who else? Were mistaken about my address. But another part was dying from fear that it wouldn't be long before they found out where I was hiding. One little movement would be enough to draw their attention. The car was gray, a worn-out 90s kind. I made a face in the darkness. I expected them to have a huge slick black Expedition, or a van with no windows, perfect for a kidnapping. The driver's door opened, but more to my surprise, an old man stepped unsteadily out of the small car, and walked up the front porch steps, where a lady as old as he was opened the door welcomingly for him. All the while, I thought, what the heck? It was amazing how news traveled so fast. It had only been about 4 or 5 hours ago when I burst into my house, panting and running out of breath. I no longer had strength to walk up the stairs, nor to take off my shoes, and merely collapsed on the nearest couch available. Somewhere between trying to catch my breath and sorting out my thoughts, I fell asleep. I awoke a few hours later, made myself dinner, and switched on the television. There, being telecasted on the news, was a story of the man I'd seen in the alley. They didn't give out any details, just about a man found injured in a back alley downtown. They showed places of which I recognizably ran from: the dumpster, the alley, the shadows. I listened until I could bear the guilt no more and turned off the TV. Injured, the newscaster had said, meaning the man wasn't dead. That was a good thing. But they stated no names, no one they suspected who had done this. I panicked slightly on that fact, but convinced myself, "No, you'll be fine," a voice inside me said. "It won't be long until they catch them, and after that, you'll be safe. No one will come after you anymore." Okay, so I might be overreacting, over-paranoid, making this a bigger deal than it was. But on the other hand, why had that car been following me? It was no gang from the alley, but a wrinkly old man coming home. Thinking about all this caused my mind to split off in two. A part of me was overwhelmed by guilt that I should perhaps go to the cops and testify, another part of me dreads the outcome. I glanced at the phone that was no farther than a foot away. I grabbed it, my fingers hovering over its touch screen. The phone, sensitive to my touch, dialed despite my hesitation. 9. Then, I remembered Hitaki Kakashi. He worked at the station on the weekends. I thought about him picking up on the other line, and then having to explain to him. That would be hard and awkward, plus there was no doubt that he would inform my parents about my call, leading to more explanations. 1. The odd squiggle-shaped tattoo of that guy in the corner, the strange markings on the other guy's face, and then there was the man with the really cool eyes, but these were all just vague details. Anything else, I hadn't seen. 1. Then I recalled how that man glanced and smiled knowingly at me. It was with that single look that he sent his silent message, something along the lines of "Don't tell anyone," or "Keep quiet," in his silent warning, or else. What? Or else what? What could he possibly do? My thumb hovered over the talk button, hesitating. No need to rush. My thumb, redirected by instinct, and pressed end. She won't be telling anyone. To my disappointment, he was right. Hitaki Kakashi. From the time he heard the report about the stabbed man, Kakashi knew instinctively it was a gang fight. Fights have been going on and on presently in Konoha, especially just outside downtown, where all the criminals and drug dealers and addicts hung out. He confronted some of them himself, but no matter how many times they tried to drive them away, they always kept coming back, causing trouble. But, as Kakashi came to check out the scene himself, he was surprised to find that his prediction had been wrong. The alley, once forgotten and isolated, was now filled with his fellow workers, and a strip of yellow tape edged around the crime scene, around a man sprawled on the floor. Dead. If he wasn't, paramedics would have swiftly carried him off to the hospital. But the old man was already dead, blood still sickeningly surrounding him. In his hand was a similarly bloodied knife. The sun had long descended for quite some time now, and in its place was the clear and natural navy blue sky. An occasional cloud or two hovered over the city, but none of them were enough to cover the scenic stars that ubiquitously dotted the vast space above. Miraculously, staring blankly upon the beautiful night had been able to keep my mind off the certain events of this past afternoon. I'd forgotten almost entirely about it, almost. "Sakura." Mom's voice called, breaking the serenity. I glanced sideways to find her head poking through the open door of my room. "Can we come in?" I shrugged, "Sure." Mom opened the door wider, and my dad's jolly image appeared behind her. "Sup, kiddo? Am I in trouble?" No. Dad replied, messing up my hair. Why? What did you do? Nothing. Nothing really, I thought sarcastically. So what's up? We'll be out for a few days. Mom explained, you know the reason, business trip. My mom added softly, I'm sorry, honey. Oh, I replied offhandedly, okay. It's okay. She had always been like this, my mother, always annoyingly apologizing for leaving so often, even though she never really bothered to stop. But at least she worried. Dad didn't even bother. In fact, he was already wearing one of his cheeky grins, sorry kiddo. He said, I have to watch over our new branch in Suna. Make sure everything's running smoothly, you know. Dad was once a cop. A few years after having me though, he left the police service and now handled an entire department of a widely successful security business. At present, he's all brains, papers, office work and managing, something, safe, as Mom called it. And her. I need to meet a new client this weekend, and look into things before the trial. It's in another city, so I'll be out of town for a few days. A lawyer who defended all kinds of people that have been in trouble with the law, though youth law was her major. And for that reason, ever since I was a child, I've been the center of all teasing, not only because of my abnormal forehead, but because I was easily labeled the little goody girl, daughter of a lawyer and a former cop and who has never ever done anything wrong. And that kind of reputation, despite my mother's opinion otherwise, was not good. It was kind that'll have you beat up in the hallways. I still feel bad for leaving her again. It hasn't even been at least 2 months since our last trip. Mom said. I knew they were sincerely sorry for leaving me to go on a business trip, although it didn't seem like it with my father's cheery face, so I decided not to give them a hard time. Besides, their jobs brought home the big bucks, the rain of clothes and shoes and shopping sprees and food. I'm not complaining. If you want, my mother continued, I'll call Akira and make her accompany you so that you won't have to be on your own. No. I answered, a little too quickly than I intended for, I'll be fine alone. Promise. Akira was my mother's distant relative. She's nice. But having her around meant her little devil in disguise of a son would be tagging along too. And that usually leads to an indoor hurricane in the house. Oh. Well, all right, if you say so. She hesitated, good night, then. Night. And with that, they silently left my room. I got off the bed and slouched upon my peach fuzz chair. I figured if there was anything that could get me to forget about my previous guilt complex, it would be the computer/internet, a remarkable device of technology that always seemed to have its way in amusing bored to death and guilty humans such as myself. But apparently, my computer wasn't doing a very good job in carrying out its one and only purpose, seeing as I was still staring upon my empty buddy list at the present moment. Out of the 100+ contacts that I have entered, I was surprised by how many were online. 2. One of them was Ino, and the other was a girl in my science class that I barely even knew. Talking to the other girl was out of the question, though just as I was about to click on Ino's name, she signed out. I groaned loudly. I admit the greatly obvious fact that her continuous gossips of I heard this from that irritated me, and the rest of the world, but I never thought the time would come where I'd actually long for it. I directed my gaze off the list and instead, upon the inactive desktop where a collage of pictures lay ascribed as my personal dormant wallpaper. There was one of myself and Ino on the beach, and I remembered how we'd once again got into another of our pointless little fights over some guy she claimed to have seen first, but instead he went over and talked to me, obviously. Another was an image of Naruto and me eating instant noodles. That was actually just last month, when he finally received his driver's license, after many failed attempts to pass both the written exam and the road test. He had, that exact same day, wasted no time, driving me at once to Ichiraku, a Japanese restaurant where he treated me to ramen, Naruto's favorite dish. He actually paid for my food, which was a miracle. I looked at a few more pictures, waiting a bit too desperately for anyone to log on. As seconds passed unproductively, I stood up and decided no one would, at this point in time. I walked towards the closet and changed into comfier apparel. All my classmates were probably out having fun and making the best out of the last few hours of the weekend, before the sun would rise in the morning, signaling Monday once again. Too bad I couldn't join them. Suddenly, I found myself stumbling, and as soon as I regained my balance, I glared upon the bothersome object that lay innocently on the floor. Binoculars. I must have left it earlier, carelessly dropping it as I ran off to do my prying. My gaze traveled up towards the window where the object lay adjacent to, stared at it for a few seconds and then back again, as an idea rose in my mind. Of course, this new stimulated idea, I knew, was just as idiotic and negligent as it was tempting and more or less habitual, in my case. But that was not enough to stop the inescapable urge I felt, successfully drawing me to grab the binoculars. I positioned nearby my opened window and peered out the glass through the two lenses of the small telescopic device. Unconsciously or consciously, I directed it towards the wreck. The building was at an angle from my viewpoint, showing only one side of its exterior. I focused the telescope towards the only spot that managed to catch my attention. The windows, and the small portions of which the street lights illuminated were the only ones lit amongst the dark and still vicinity. A van was parked in front of it and the yard was fairly clean compared to the way it had been earlier. These I could tell by the figures, shadows cast by the moonlight. Going back to the windows, there were 6 of them in both the first and second floor, horizontally aligned across each story. All the ones on the second floor were brightly lit, and I scanned them individually. I couldn't perceive anything further than blurred shadows, for the curtains prevented me from seeing any more. Each window was roughly the same. Vague figures, 2 in some, 3 in the others, moved about. A party, maybe. I watched for several minutes. Of course, I probably could have lasted for hours, but was cut short as I reached the last window. There was something about it that differed among the others. This window possessed no curtains, and its transparent pane exposed much of the room's interior. But I paid no heed to that, and instead focused my gaze upon the single silhouette of a person that stood still, staring out the window. I dropped on the floor. I knew it was impossible that I could have been seen, considering the darkness that filled the night, but I ducked just in case. Slowly as I possibly can, I headed back towards my chair and sat before my laptop with a built-in microphone and webcam and Bluetooth with wireless connection and everything that a girl could ask for. A gift for my straight A's in 9th grade. At that moment, the computer chimed, and I jolted, turning instantly towards the sound where an orange highlighted window blinked continuously on my screen. I squealed inwardly in delight that at last, someone chose to log in. But it was not a conversation window as I expected and hoped it would be, nor an alert that someone had logged in. Instead, it was an invite. Shiite, view profile, has added you to his/her buddy list. Add to my list. Block this person. Below it, it said. Additional message. Hey there. It was a natural instinct for me to decline and ignore a message from someone I didn't know, especially considering the internet's unpredictability. A large number of people don't mind conversing and making friends, or even hooking up with unfamiliar foreigners over the net. I assumed it was due to complete boredom or desperation. I've encountered a few already in the past, and I always ignored them. I followed a single rule every time I went online, and that was no outside contact over the internet between unknown individuals. And this Shiite was undoubtedly one of those unknown individuals. Yet even so, I found myself accepting the invite, but I had no plan on chatting with him or her, whatsoever. Apparently, it didn't matter whether I planned on it or not, because after a few seconds, HSIAIDT, I can see you. I raised my eyebrow, unsure how to react. Deciding to ignore the message, I closed the window and carried on with, staring at my computer screen. It wasn't long before another message popped up. HSIAIDT, I'm watching you. I hesitated, before typing in. Lil Pink Chick, do I know you? HSIAIDT, no, but I know you. Lil Pink Chick, who are you? HSIAIDT, someone who's watching you right this very second. Lil Pink Chick, what do you want? HSIAIDT, you. I pursed my lips together, realizing only now that my heart had started beating at an abnormally fast pace. HSIAIDT, you're scared, aren't you? Lil Pink Chick, no. HSIAIDT, then why are your fingers shaking? I looked down, and sure enough, my fingers were quivering over the keyboard. HSIAIDT, I'm right, am I? Lil Pink Chick, no. HSIAIDT, liar. Lil Pink Chick, if you think this is some joke, it's not funny. Stop it. HSIAIDT, I'm not kidding. I really can see you. Lil Pink Chick, as if. Just shut up. You can't see me. HSIAIDT, yes I can. Lil Pink Chick, prove it. HSIAIDT, you're really that persistent. Fine. She iced. You're wearing a white oversized shirt that reaches down your thighs, with a light blue patterned print in the middle. Plus denim shorts. HSIAIDT, and your hair's tied up in a ponytail. I froze. HSIAIDT, told you I wasn't kidding. It took me a whole minute to take in what he had just said, which was, much to my horror, very accurate. How did he know? How? Could he really see me right now? I shuddered. No, of course he couldn't. And though it was highly unlikely, I tried convincing myself that it was nothing more than a mere coincidence. Lil Pink Chick, that was a coincidence. HSIAIDT, we both know that's not true. Lil Pink Chick, stop talking to me. Directing the pointer towards the top right section of the screen, I clicked the X button and the window quickly vanished. Just as quickly, another window popped open. HSIAIDT, no can do. Lil Pink Chick, shut up. Once again, I exited the window, but it was futile. HSIAIDT, please don't make me come out there just to prove I'm not lying. I don't think you'd like it if I do. I didn't reply. I don't know if it was simply because I couldn't think of anything to say, or if it's because I was too scared to even do so. Saying, shut up, or, stop it, only seemed to urge him to continue on. HSIAIDT, you're scared. HSIAIDT, don't even try to deny it. I can see you. I know you're scared. I gulped. HSIAIDT, you can't even type anymore. HSIAIDT, wait. Who am I kidding? You're not scared. HSIAIDT, you're terrified. See, I know a lot about you. It took much of my strength to force myself to type. Lil Pink Chick, you creep. Get a life. You're lying. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I waited for a response. Nothing. Then, after a few minutes, just as I began to think I won't be receiving a reply, he did. HSIAIDT, oh. But I very much believe I do. Comma. Height. Haruno Sakura. Underscore. Unknown. He saw her. For multiple times now, today. She seemed to be everywhere. Even in places she wasn't supposed to be. In places that were entirely none of her business. Places that weren't meant for little girls playing spy games such as herself. He meant no harm, of course. In fact, he dreaded it even to have to treat her as a threat. He felt almost sorry for her. But rules were rules, and orders were orders. He had to do something to be safe, just precautions for now. Because he wasn't the only one who did the sightings. She herself saw some things, too. And perhaps she saw him, which would make things much worse for his case. And that was just unacceptable. What? Ino asked, intentionally oblivious of the willful glares I clearly sent her. You know very well what, I snapped. Height. Haruno Sakura. I struggled to breathe. I couldn't believe it. This person, he knew me. But how? Was he a part of that gang-like group back in the alley? Had they somehow managed to get hold of my contact? My name, even. Thoughts swirled in my mind. HSIAIDT, LM Foo. My mind then came to an immediate halt. I blinked. HSIAIDT, ah ha 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 ha, look at a mirror quickly. Your face is priceless. Bewildered, it took me a couple of seconds wondering just what exactly was going on, before finally, it snapped to me. I growled. Lil pink chick. Ino. You stupid little. HSIAIDT has logged off. I glared as she spoke in between her giggling fits. Your webcam was on, and, how could I resist? That was not funny. But your face sure was. She doubled up in laughter. You know that new email I made up for you? It's an acronym for, Haruno Sakura is an idiot. Genius, EH. That's stupid. I glared at her. It was only Monday morning and yet I've already lost count of how many times I've glared at Ino. You scared the hell out of me. I really thought you were some stalker. She scuffed, who in their right mind would stalk you out of all people? You're dense, fat, ugly, huge forehead, the list just goes on and on. Rolling my eyes, I waited for Ino to finish her daily rituals. Any normal person would have simply grabbed what they needed from their locker and headed to class, but Ino had always insisted on applying final touches with her makeup, hair. Really, she should be forbidden to have a mirror in her locker. Noticing my sudden silence, she asked, her voice slightly serious yet with mirth. You're not mad, are you? I shook my head. So what's up? I shrugged. Ino glared, unsatisfied by my silence. Tell me. Truth is, the amount of stories and information there was contained inside of me was overflowing that I just couldn't help but tell her everything, despite consciousness's directive otherwise. After a few seconds hesitation, I did. I excluded my little awkward visit to the wreck and basically any detail that gave away the men's possible identities, not that I'd seen much anyway. It wasn't exactly telling everything, but it was still more than I've told anyone else, which was nothing to no one. I said I had only seen the man nicked, and then I ran away, the end. Ino was thrilled nonetheless. Awesome. I shook my head. No telling anyone. So you won't even let the idiot know? No. I said as though it was the most obvious answer there was. Naruto will only make a big fuss about it. So. And then she was gone, not anymore in front of me but hiding behind my back. She muttered, oh crap. I turned to wherever she was looking at. There, in the middle of the hall, was a large man, standing with his ever-present fearsome facade, Morino Ibiki. He worked alongside Kakashi as the school's liaison officer, every now and then turning up to confiscate illicit materials or break up an archetypal fistfight that happened on occasion, and sometimes for talks about violence and crime, what not to do and such, boring stuff that most of us chose to ignore. They were the type who walked around with walkie-talkies, and whenever they were present meant trouble also was. He's supervising today, Ino explained. It's weird, Kakashi-sensei's here too. She paused to think for a moment. So who do you think's dealing? She asked, gossip in her tone now present, the one that always sounded eager for the dirt. Or maybe possession. My guess, Kin and Dosu and their mob. They're the type to bring in guns. Or maybe it's the smokers. They always look high every time I see them. Okay, I'm going to class before Morino hears you and screams at us, I chided. It's none of our business, anyway. Well, if it's of any interest to you, I heard we got new students coming in. Ino explained brightly, all guys. Probably from an all-boys school. I heard, Ino would not live without the trend of gossip. I doubt even half of what she said was true. I nodded absent-mindedly and turned to leave. Sakura, your class is this way, Ino said, pointing the opposite direction of where I was headed, towards the direction where the big grouchy-looking Ibiki was situated. And have Morino yell at me. Forget it, I'm taking the long way. Our school, the Hidden Leaves, was a circular structure surrounding in its center a spacious, round courtyard. The longer way towards my first class, science, meant walking all the way around that arc, instead of cutting through the garden like I usually did. I began to regret my plan of action when I noticed the lessening crowds in the hallways. I was running by the time I reached the back portion of the school building, when something through a little window brought me to halt. Quietly, I tiptoed my way beside the double-door exit and peered through one of the embedded panes. The doors lead out to the school staff parking lot, and there, gathered on the loading zone, was the principal, a couple of the school admins, Kakashi and, to my surprise, several younger individuals who had just recently come out of a silver van. I recognized them immediately as the ones I saw at the wreck just yesterday. Why were they here? They couldn't be the new students Ino had talked about, could they? All boys' schools are usually private institutions, meaning rich, meaning lads with signature clothing and gold watches, whereas these guys looked just the exact opposite. Faded, ripped jeans, dark shirts with a variety of visible off-putting prints, black hoodies, and these weren't the JanSport North Face type jackets that well-off, gangster wannabes wore along with their low-hanging bling-blings. It was more the kind a hoodlum would wear while bashing car windows and nicking stuff off convenience stores. Perhaps the only thing that broke their threatening image as a group was the little puppy cheerfully running around, and the equally energetic boy who was playing with it. Morino appeared beside Kakashi while the adults went on exchanging words. I wondered subconsciously what could be serious enough that had to involve both the school's stationed officers. I scanned the small crowd of young men, all of whom had remained silent throughout the whole discussion, until one caught my eye. I didn't know what made him any different from the rest, so I stayed still, thinking. Then, it hit me. He was the same boy from yesterday, the one who might have, although I genuinely otherwise, caught me staring by the sidewalk. What I did not understand though, was why just the sight of him sent me squirming out of discomfort. Just as I was about to leave, a loud, boisterous, instantly recognizable voice exclaimed in my ear. Sakura, there you are. Hey, what are you looking at? I immediately clasped the ever-so-strident mouth, shut your. In mid-sentence, I shrieked as I tumbled forward when the door I'd been presently leaning on had all of a sudden swung open. You. The roar boomed and echoed, effectively attracting everyone's attention in the parking lot. Not that it mattered anyway, the idiot's deafening greeting earlier had already done that very job. It was hard to look up, not entirely because of Morino's downright glare, but also on account of knowing just how many stares were now focused in our direction. Yet hard as it was for me, the idiot simply grinned, and pointed towards our principal, Tsunade. Hey, old hag, what's up? Tsunade growled temperedly, get the hell back to class. That means you too, Uzumaki. But I didn't even do anything. Let's go, I whispered sharply and smacked him on the head in the process. In no time, I was already walking away in such a hurried manner that I was almost running, almost. As I strode away, with the idiot ambling beside me, I felt a firm and steady gaze drilling on my back. Although it was only a hunch, I felt almost certain that someone was staring at me. Despite the great urge to walk faster and escape out of sight, another urge to do a different act proved greater and my body gave into it. I looked back. Everyone had started entering the school building through another one of the entrances. All but one remained, and I was met by a pair of eyes staring back into my own. Sakura. Rock Lee waved, I missed you. Why weren't you in art? I laid down my tray of food, and glared at a certain blonde idiot. Detention. Blame him. Lunch, my second most favorite class after dismissal. Everybody sat down, gradually filling up the once empty chairs that encircled our characteristically designated table. Located in the farthest corner of the cafeteria, only 5 steps away from the beverage counter and adjacent to one of the vast windows that viewed the peaceful streets of town. The perfect spot. Sorry, Sakura, Naruto grinned sheepishly, but it wasn't all my fault. I didn't even know that. Sakura got caught snooping around, Ino interjected, big deal. That's like catching Naruto tripping on his own foot. Happens every time, so enough about that. Saturday with Ren was so fun. We went. Torture. Choji Akamaiki covered his ears dramatically, spare me, please. We all laughed except for Ino. Shut up, Choji. I'm in love with him. He's the one, I tell you, and he's Mr. Right. No guy could ever outshine him. He's gorgeous, an awesome kisser, and did I tell you he has a 6-pack? And biceps. And, she paused. Man, look at that. How typical. Ino hadn't even finished talking about one boy, and she's already got her eyes on the next. Though I wasn't as intrigued and fascinated by guys as she was obsessed with them, I turned my head in search of what had captivated her utmost attention. Forget Ren. I got a whole hottie selection right here. Gathered around the cafeteria's entrance, opposite of our setting, was Ino's ideal hottie selection. It was the guys from the parking lot. Hey, it's them, 1010 whispered to us, sipping her can of juice in the process. Careful, Ino, they're bad. But then again, that's exactly how you want 'em. She rolled her eyes. What do you mean? I was confused. They're staying here for a while, 1010 explained, for space and facilities. HL's supporting this program that involves helping kids or something. That's all Guy Sensei really said. Like a tutoring program. More like a suspension program. Totally messed up dudes. I heard they all got kicked out in previous schools. I thought about the things they could have done to get expelled. Constant skipping, swearing at teachers, inappropriate behavior, low grades, failing classes, bullying. What were they doing in our cafeteria? No, Ino protested with a certain twinkle in her eyes. I heard they got in trouble with the law. I stared at them. With the way they appeared and behaved, a single look was enough to assume that they were most likely trouble. To my surprise, a girl was amid them, standing out distinctively with her skinny denim shorts, and a coat with a slit that showed much of her bare stomach. Add all that plus the fact that she was flirting, equaled to a successful exploit in bringing the word, tramp, up a whole new level, that was, excluding her thick-framed glasses. That, on the other hand, was an amusing contradiction. I love how I don't even know her, and I already think she's a bitch. Ino spat as she looked at the same girl with disgust. She had noticed her too, but who couldn't have when she was the only girly girl amongst a mob of, well, manly men. I mean, skin much. Ino went on, she's all over him. It's like he can't even breathe anymore. And some glasses are completely classy, but the thick frame, thick glass she's wearing is just not. What's she trying to dress up as? A nerdy whore. Guys, Choji, surprisingly, bothered to actually speak instead of eat. Don't look now, but there's a freaky redhead staring right at us. Despite that, everyone looked. I easily spotted the said redhead standing with the guys, but unlike the other guys who occupied themselves with filling their trays with food, he stood at a corner and stared in our direction. It was starting to get bothersome how I always seemed to despise the same particular boy when I had no idea whatsoever who he was, nor why my gaze was always drawn to him. Maybe it was because of Four Eyes effectively drawing attention to both of them as she always seemed to have locked him in an obviously unwanted embrace. Or maybe it was because he was, to some odd extent that I will never acknowledge, rather, eye-catching in his own darkly appealing way. Though I doubt it was attractive given that I, for one, was never really, to bad boy types the way Ino was so overly magnetized to them. Or maybe, I considered, it was because of this familiar yet indescribable sensation that surged throughout my body every time I laid eyes on the boy. I watched with inquisitive surveillance as he turned away from the counter, his tray of food in hand, and then halted in a sudden manner. There was no question of why. It was clear despite the room's length that was between him and me. I knew for certain the awkward and unfortunate fact that he had caught me staring at him for the second time, the first by sidewalk, but the parking lot episode didn't count. He had been the one staring at me. I snapped my head so hard in the other direction that I felt as though my neck went snapping too. "They're heading here," Ino whispered blissfully. "How do I look?" "What is wrong with you?" I asked with shock. "They're suspendees." "Meaning, trouble." "So," she replied nonchalantly. Groaning, I sunk back in my chair and covered my face as the guys occupied the table to our right, and the other empty one next to it. Kakashi was with them, an odd sight of a teacher eating with students. "Ino," I whispered, "Ino." "What?" "That's them." "What?" Her face twitched with annoyance. "Would you stop mumbling?" "That's them. The ones I told you about, yesterday." "No kidding," she exclaimed loudly, as if she'd forgotten the little fact that the subjects of our tete-a-tete were just on the next table. "They're the ones who stabbed an old guy in that alley." "Holy crap." I glared at her. "No, I meant the ones I saw hanging out at the wreck." "Oh. Well, they are cute," she remarked loudly. Ino was fixated upon the said guys like an overly fanatical devotee of the Hot Posse organization. Conversely, I, too, couldn't seem to take my eyes off them. I couldn't help it. I turned to stare in a position where I obtained a good prospect of the next table. In spite of that, I couldn't seem to find the single word that would describe them. They were particularly an odd bunch indeed. Although most had appeared to be rough and tough, some others, surprisingly, looked not so bad. The strange redhead sat on the table next to ours, neither speaking nor eating, and though they didn't possess an atmosphere as tough or scary as the others, the frown he wore was enough to make up for it. I noticed a lot of them sported tattoos. One of them had scarlet triangles on both his cheeks, and while I found it uncultured to have his dog anyone or the table, his shoulder or atop his head, with his goofy grin, he indisputably fell under the not-so-bad list. Another had languidly laid his head on the table, dead or asleep. I couldn't quite decipher while someone else was staring. I blinked. I supposed that dot which presently crawled on his finger was some kind of insect. He had an oversized collar, dark round sunglasses, perhaps this boy was blind. There were a couple others who had their backs turned away. There was a blue head, but I couldn't make out anything more than his hair color. The boy who always caught my eye had once again done so. I saw him sitting on the other table, the one farther from ours, and I watched as he jabbed his food with a fork. I watched and lost track of time. You know, it isn't very polite to stare. I jolted with surprise and thought it was him. But it was another person. An amused smirk had been very much a good hint of who had spoken. He was not the same guy that I've been staring at up to that time, but rather, an analogous duplicate in appearance. "Who said I was staring at you?" I snapped. It isn't very polite to retort at someone who had just kindly admonished you either. "Excuse my friend." A glare from Ino. She has, anger problems. Can't control her own temper. Ah. He nodded, that irksome counterfeit of a smile still wedged on his face. "Yes, I know what that's like." What did that mean? "Go to hell." I snapped. "Ladies first. That would be you." Chuckling, he said, "I have to go, unfortunately. But I'll see you both around." I glanced at the clock that hung above the cafeteria's walls and noticed that it was already halfway through lunch. I must have been staring for longer than I thought. He stood up along with the others in his table, and I noticed the other table next to them began leaving too. He gathered several pieces of papers and pencils that were dispersed before him on the table. I scuffed, I hope we don't. I hope we do. Ino chirped in. No we don't. The boy rolled his eyes and had started to strut backwards, facing us as he spoke. Try and relax, you hag. I'll see you around. See ya. Ino called out. He grinned, responding to her flirty smile with a playful one. Bye, beautiful. He left. Then, something snapped to me. I growled. What did he just call me? OMG it's Ino. Then I saw them in field 2 with dogs and they're so cute, but that girl was there again and she just ruined the picture. I just wanna strangle her. Don't you? OMG it's Ino, and did I tell you that she tripped? I groaned. Ino's blabbers were haunting me, in the phone, in face-to-face conversations, and right now, over the net. I glanced at the digital clock on the bottom right corner of my computer screen, 8:44 p.m. OMG it's Ino, and I only did the typical. There's a whole array of hotter men that goes to my school, so would I stay with someone who doesn't? But he's all like what the effin' stuff. Lil Pink Chick. You broke up with him through a text message, you idiot, what do you expect? It was only earlier today, to be more precise, right after lunch, that Ino decided in the spur of the moment to end her short-lived relationship with Ren, the boy who she met over the summer, with the clear-cut yet absurd reason that she met hotter men, in her own words. OMG it's Ino, PFFTT, he was too pathetic anyway. And lighten up, will you? Lil Pink Chick. I'm still mad at you. OMG it's Ino, stop sulking. I got a gift for you. Kinda like a peace offering or whatever. Lil Pink Chick. What is it? OMG it's Ino, Louvre 3 you'll see. And then you'll thank me. XD. OMG it's Ino, Nyways, GTG, peace out. Suddenly, the computer chimed. I stared upon the new window that had just popped out my screen. It was an email announcing that someone had sent me a private message in one of my many social web network accounts that I had made, and yes, I do realize that I should get a life. Inuzuka Kiba. He couldn't help it, he was grinning so widely that it hurt his cheeks. Kiba saw it. He caught it with his own sharp eyes, although even an idiot could identify it. And it wasn't just imagination, because, really, it couldn't be more obvious than it already was. The two were basically frozen, just drowning in each other's pools, so completely in the moment. Something was there. Though it was unseen, invisible, a secret passed on between the two, something was without a doubt there, floating like an aura, a spark, even though saying that would be way too girly. Kiba was not the only one who noticed it either. The rest had seen it too, and were most likely thinking the very same thoughts he had at the same moment. But how could it not be missed? Their days lasted for a whole, entire second, before the witch butted in jealously, because even someone as dim-witted as her could tell that something was there. No one was making a move though. Everyone's just pretty much stealing glances, looking for some kind of emotion on the cold one's face, and of course, failing. But Kiba just couldn't contain it. It was an event, a chance, of a lifetime that almost never ever came. Now it had, he was going to take advantage of it. Kiba nudged him in the ribs. Hey, Uchiha, yet before he could finish, the boy he was talking to walked off. Typical. But Kiba wasn't about to give up. In a matter of a second, he had caught up and nudged him a second time. He didn't budge. Dude, a third nudge. The boy flinched. Finally, a reaction. What? He barked. Do you want? Kiba grinned, so widely that his pointed teeth had shown, almost looking like fangs. You wanna tell me what that was about? What was it about? That. What? That thing you got going on with that girl. What thing? He asked, clearly frustrated. What girl? I'm talking about Karen, Kiba replied sarcastically, causing the boy to glare. The girl, Kiba exclaimed, who else? She's got to be the only person in this world who can get you all pensive like this. Go screw yourself, Inuzuka. Nah, man, I'd rather screw her. Again, a twitch. Now Kiba's grin was simply unstoppable. Seriously, do you know what this means? That you're a horny little boy. No, Kiba replied triumphantly, that you are not gay. Another dagger-sharp glare. But that's not the point. You have a point, he asked sarcastically, but Kiba ignored it. There was something there, between you and that chick. I sensed it. There was like, you know, a connection. Shut up or you'll be sensing a connection between my fist and your face. He snapped angrily and walked off. Kiba grinned. Yep. He was in complete denial. I ran. No, I sprinted. Even faster when the bell blared out its final ring, symbolizing that class had already begun. I couldn't believe what luck I had, running late when I had unmistakably planned on reaching the school 10 minutes earlier. Instead, I was in an opposite scenario, hurrying along these empty halls, my footsteps echoing amongst its bare silence, dragging along my hefty, book-filled bag, and might I add late. It was stupid of me to stay up so late last night, as frustration kept running through my veins like rushed adrenaline, keeping me awake until 2 in the morning. After a few halls, corners and stairways, I reached my first period class, the Graphic Communications Computer Lab. I entered without a moment's hesitation, as if that would make me less tardy than I already was, and inwardly prepared myself for a dull lecture about tardiness embarrassingly in front of the class. But instead what I found behind that door was far from any expectations I'd made and, as I realized a second later, was worse than any lecture. I might as well have walked into a closet with the surprise, confusion and shame that had waved through me all at once. In fact, walking into a closet would most likely have been better, and most definitely preferred, than standing before a male-populated classroom, apart from the four-eyed girl flirting in a corner, with all their attention suddenly focused on me in a nerve-wracking manner. Sakura. In this class. Well, that's a surprise. The embossed crooked line on Hitaki Kakashi's face clearly denoted he was grinning beneath that dark mask of his. I would have forcefully wiped it off his face if only I hadn't some respect for this immature, highly irritating, rumored porn-reading old man. And I have to say I'm pretty damn odd, too. It's not like that, I blurted, I'm not, I wouldn't. I bit my lips from further humiliation. The room, my alleged graphic comms classroom now filled with troublemakers, was brightly lit with the sun beaming down through the windows, sweltering hot as the AC was most likely off. The only source of cool air was through the open sills, all of which hadn't done much of a good job for it was still ablaze inside. Several computers were backed up in the far wall of the room, some of them switched on. My eyes landed upon an individual sitting before one. Gross, it's the hag, he said with that distinctive smile of his. It was the guy from the cafeteria that had called me a name much like he had done just now. Gross, it's your face, I sneered back. Sigh, be nice, Kakashi piped in. Sakura, your class is downstairs in the library. Computer lab 2. Go. I raised an eyebrow, this is my class. Idiot. Turn around. I made sure to glare at the jerk, sigh, before turning around to glance at the door. There, written in big, bold letters, a note said, Sarutobi's Block B and C graphics class in the library, CL2 for the rest of the week. Oh. With that said, I would have instantly jumped for joy. Kakashi-sensei wasn't the type to be formal on school matters, which made him eminently well liked around the campus. But the result of his generous deed had me staying there longer than necessary. It was all right the first second or two, but when time struck its third second, I was already fiddling my hands off. My eyes roamed up the ceiling and about the room in an attempt to alleviate in my mind from the stares I was receiving. That mission failed the moment my gaze landed upon a certain boy sitting on the farthest corner of the room. It was the boy from the cafeteria and the parking lot, and the wreck who was always a magnet to my eyes. He was turned away from me and towards the window, thankfully, so he didn't see me gawking like a jaw-dropped statue, with his mouth propped upon his interlocked fingers. Four eyes presently clutched the life out of him by wrapping her arms around his neck in a strangling manner. She acted like they were going out, but the irritated look imprinted on his face definitely told otherwise. Suddenly, he turned his head, and before I could look away, he had my emerald orbs locked with his obsidian ones. Obsidian. I've only seen one person with the same strange hue of eyes as he did, but that was way back before, years back. So this little thought that was lingering in my mind was very unlikely. Nonetheless, a nagging feeling in my gut suggested just the opposite, and it grew with every second that passed as I drowned in jet black pools. "Hey hag, Hitaki's calling you." I snapped out of the trance I only then realized I was in, and, after giving another glare at Sai the jerk, looked up at the silver-haired officer. In his hand was a smaller piece of yellow paper, and I noticed scribbles of what seemed worth a single sentence. "Asuma-sensei probably won't take. Please excuse her for being late," is enough, I told him. "Just say I made you run an errand." I regretted ever speaking the moment I almost doubled over due to the sudden mass and force that came out of the blue. It was a pile of hard-covered textbooks that Kakashi had insensitively dumped into my now aching arms. "Here, drop these off at the library. That way, you won't be lying." He gave a strange look as I struggled to balance the 20 books all together, and after a moment, a heavy exhale of breath pushed past the fabric of his mask. "Someone help her out." "I'll be glad to do it," Sai piped up. I eyed him. "No, thanks. Get back to work." Kakashi indolently replied, "Sasuke, you're done, aren't you? Escort the girl, please." His gaze traced back to none other than the magnet of my attention. Sasuke. Suddenly, the former feeling that was once only a flicker, now returned ignited. It was not anymore a sense of familiarity, but now, I was almost positive I knew him. How I did was the question unanswered. Sasuke. Sasuke, Sasuke, the name repeated itself over and over in my thoughts as I searched for an explanation. A boy with shoulder-length periwinkle hair grinned widely at the said boy. "Hey Uchiha, snap out of it," he called out in a purposefully loud voice. "You've been staring at that chick forever." I tore my eyes away from the light-haired boy and stared at the current subject of my mind. The realization struck me like a punch in the stomach. Uchiha. Sasuke Uchiha. No, no. I blurted out loud without thinking, and thus earning myself a load of what the hell stares from the rest of the class. "No, no, no," I continued babbling, "it's fine. I'll be fine. I'll go. Damn it." He spoke brusquely, with a voice now slightly deeper than the last I've heard. He also seemed not to understand the concept of help, because instead of mere assistance in carrying all these books he had seized every single one of them from my grasp. With a modest ease, he lifted the tomes, sending not a glance at my shocked form. It was the very moment the room's door closed behind us that he turned around and stared at me with uncomforting and utmost scrutiny. "Have we met before?" "No." I almost dropped with relief, but my heart's pace had begun to pick up. He shrugged. All interest now gone in his eyes, he put on another stoic frontage and walked down the hall. I trailed behind the Uchiha, keeping a vigilant 2 feet distance away from the said person. Sasuke had never been the type to start up a conversation, and for this reason, I almost jumped at his sudden voice when he did. "So it's Sakura, right?" he asked, looking back and down, given our height difference, to me. "Yeah," I muttered, turning away as I purposely allowed my odd-colored hair to cover my face. The less he sees of me, the better. Unfortunately, our little conversation hadn't ended. The Uchiha, choosing to be unusually talkative today, uttered, "Nice name." He gave me an examining look. "Suits you." The statement caught me off guard. Although my heart seemed to have stopped beating, and breath was caught in my throat, one muscle decided to operate double time, my brain. Is that a good or bad thing? Did he just give me a compliment? Or was that sarcasm I heard in his voice? When I didn't respond, which was, even to Sasuke, probably quite rude, he gave up the small talk. The rest of our little walk remained silent, and went well to my liking as we had less or no interaction at all. That is, until he stopped without warning, then, bam. Rubbing my forehead out of humiliation, I looked up to see the Uchiha and the subtle rise of one of his eyebrows. He shook his head, lips pressed into a thin line as he fought back what seemed to be either an insult or a laugh. Only as he dropped the books on a shelf by the book return counter did I realize we'd reached the library. The computer lab was found right in the hub of the book-filled room. Sasuke and I stared at each other. I knew who he was unmistakably, but he obviously hadn't recognized me. I wanted to keep it that way. Despite the intense heat from the recent summer, he wore black jeans, dark worn-out sneakers, and a black shirt. His eyes, which had always been my personal favorite feature of his overall appearance, were a strange shade of jet black, and yet so dark that they verged into tints of deep blue. Red and purple clashed altogether. They were indescribable, beyond words. How could such a wonderful set of eyes belong to such a horrible person? There was only one flaw, and that was the recognizable scar, a thin yet dire white line that ran diagonally across his left cheek. I flinched at the sight. It looked deep. But I suppose it wouldn't exactly be considered a flaw, since it only added good points to his look. His eyebrows knitted to sudden frown. "What?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing. You just look familiar." It was my turn to frown. Maybe he. I doubted it. If he did, well, I'd know. But I knew he was on the road of remembering, thus I had to be careful not to trigger anything more than his already occurring thoughts. "We saw each other during lunch yesterday." "It's probably that," I reasoned. "Yeah, and in the parking lot. And don't forget the recreation center, as well." I felt heat radiating off my cheeks. "You're turning red," he remarked amusingly. This caused me to flush even more and turn away. His lips pressed in a line once again, its corners turning up slightly. He opened the door, not entering. Something in this picture wasn't right. His little deed right there wasn't right. The fact that he was opening the door for me wasn't right. The way he waited on me wasn't right. This whole scene just wasn't right. And yet the scene stayed and hadn't just evaporated like a daydream. He was still courteously opening the door for me, when all the while I thought chivalry had been extinct centuries ago. Asuma looked at me disapprovingly as I walked through the door. "Late, Miss Sakura. I've got a note." I reached for my pockets. Empty. To my rescue, Sasuke stepped forward and handed over a piece of paper to Asuma. It was the note I recognized. "She ran some errands for Hitaki," he explained. "Please excuse her." I almost scoffed. "Please. Since when did Uchiha start saying please?" Asuma sulked, visibly disappointed that he would be unable to send any student to the office today. "Well, take this sheet and grab a computer. Work period today." I walked away hastily in hopes of escaping Uchiha's stare, which I could still feel on my back, intensely clamped onto my being even as I got to the farthest vacant seat in the room. Candidly, I heard him call out a goodbye, but on purpose ignored it. It was a little mean, but compared to his doings, snobbery was nothing. I sighed in relaxation when I heard the door close. "So, spill." I jumped, my piece cut short. "Who's he?" It was Ino. "No one." "Well, that no one just opened the door for you. I never knew guys like that still existed." "Tell me about it," I muttered. "You can have him, though. He's probably single. I don't know why anyone would want to date him. The guy's a pathetic lowlife." "Whoa," Ino recanted, "hate much. What do you have against him?" "Nothing," I lied, again. "Sasuke's just. So you do know his name." I glared at her. "I am not talking to you right now." I wanted my mind off Sasuke, and Ino was not helping in the least, nor was waiting for the computer to load either. Once the small log-on box had popped out, my fingers punched habitual numbers and letters on the keyboard, and then enter. I knew clearly of the classroom do's and don'ts that applied here in the computer lab, and being online during class was a definite member of the don'ts list. But that was least of my cares at the moment. From where Sarutobi was, he wouldn't be able to see a thing on my screen, and I had a far more important mission of getting a certain someone out of my mind to carry out than worry about breaking a few class rules. Just as I was about to start working though, a soft chime came out of the computer speakers and 2 blinking windows appeared on the screen as well. From Rogue. Message 2140, for whatever it is you think I did, I am so sorry. It was sent just a couple of minutes after I had logged off last night. Initially, I was rather pleased, and the response would have stayed if I hadn't read it over and the lines, for whatever it is you think I did, hadn't echoed over in my mind. But I did, and it made me realize the insincerity of the note. There was another message posted more recently, and I clicked to read it. As if on cue, a voice boomed behind me. Haruno. Instincts kicked in and I hurriedly yet pathetically minimized the conversation window, but my attempt was in vain, for Asuma, currently standing behind me, had already seen the chat box. First warning, he snapped, exiting the window conversation. Get to work. As he walked away, Ino's face was practically hovering over mine, her eyes wide and shining with interest. Okay, now what was that about? Obviously nothing, you're assuming it is. I'm missing something here, she reflected, frustrated. First, some hot guy was flirting with you, and now this, secretly chatting. Since when did you have a love life that I didn't know about? No love life, I told her. You're skipping conclusions again. A thoughtful pause. And I was not flirting. She scoffed. Well, he was. Who? Wait, forget it. A guy bumps into you and you'd think that's flirting. A guy looks at you and you'd think that's flirting. Get my point. And besides, it'd be so out of character for him to actually do what you think he was doing. I couldn't get myself to say, flirt with me, because really, the thought of it was already ridiculous enough. And what makes you think you know his character? Ino asked challengingly. This is pointless. Stop talking. I dismissed our meaningless quarrel before it got to a sensitive topic that I did not want to cross. It was that last message that brought back the strong, overwhelming notion I thought to have already gotten rid of this morning. Nice name. Suits you. Sasuke. Thoughts of him reeled back in my mind. The likelihood that I'd been talking to the last person on earth I wanted to converse with had irked me to no end. To be frank, it was not Sasuke, but rather, the fact that he opened the door for me that was bothersome. He had been nice, too nice for anyone's good, and he actually spoke to me among anyone else, and that was proof enough that something wasn't right. A part of me wondered his intentions, whether he had one or not. But another part of me wanted to stop resisting and just accept that he did what he did. Faults and trouble came easy on Sasuke, simply because he always went about looking for it as his second nature. Therefore, it was no surprise finding him in this special program that gives help to kids, which he clearly needed, in my opinion. I don't know what he did to get expelled, but it definitely wasn't good. Either that, or he dropped out, simply because he does seem like the dropout type. Both ways seemed fitting for the Uchiha. Because both ways were a failure. Hazuka Suigetsu. Cute, he admitted mentally, grinning as he stared at the retreating backs of the said girl and his friend. He would have probably described her as hot, if it wasn't for the amusing, slightly adorable look that instantly embossed on her face when she heard the Uchiha's name. As a witness, Suigetsu knew that most would have been, at the least, speechlessly struck with awe and wonder at what the female population called the Uchiha's handsomeness. He wasn't that good-looking, Suigetsu thought smugly, and for that he was thankful. If he thought otherwise, then something would be very, very wrong with him. But this girl, this chick, was far from odd. It was as though she'd seen a ghost, and when Uchiha stood up, she actually took a step backwards, her eyes wide alarmingly as if he were some appalling spider that had just crawled up her arm. Any ordinary female would have irritatedly jumped for joy at the opportunity to be alone with Uchiha. That Suigetsu never really understood, but the chick had the definite opposite reaction. Her head was even shaking the slightest as if to say, "No, get the hell back down." She was so terrified, it was cute and hilarious at the same time. But her expression wasn't the best, it was the Uchiha's. He obviously saw the way she looked at him, and yet, arrogant as the guy was, he pretended not to notice. But that twitch he gave did not go unnoticed by Suigetsu. He squirmed barely under the odd repulsive stare the girl had given him. Then he tried making it up by showing off, carrying those books all by himself. But, nah, that girl definitely poked a hole through Uchiha's missile-proof ego. It was quite entertaining, seeing that it wasn't every day a girl is turned off by the Uchiha, and Suigetsu took joy when that moment finally came. Once Uchiha was out the door, Suigetsu burst out laughing. It was only when I received that particular message on an early 5 after 8 in the morning, as I took in the sarcastic wit of the question and the nonchalance of how he said my new confused nickname, that I realized the illogicality of my thoughts the previous night. As if someone like Sasuke would really go around being friendly to random people over the net. Impossible. Sasuke was infamous for his not-so-nice persona. What makes you think you know his character? Ino's question echoed in my mind, and now I've got just the answer for it. What makes me think so? Only about 100 things I knew and witnessed. That's all the clear response to that. I don't quite know Sasuke, but I knew of and about him enough to be certain that he wasn't this some stranger of a person from Cyberworld. He can't be. No way. With that reconciled, I responded. Is there some particular reason why you've recently been running late? Ino inquired just after first block when we met up by my locker like we usually did at the 15-minute breaks, otherwise known as recess, although students here refused to call it that simply because it was too elementary. I got caught up on some things. What things? Like nothing. Ouch. She dramatized. Since when did you start keeping secrets from me? Since you came up with the bizarre idea that the word secret is a synonym for the word newsflash. I retorted. There's a difference. Newsflash, tell. Secret, no tell. Get it? She didn't, because she was already standing against the rectangular window about a yard's length from my locker. You're not listening, are you? My locker area was on the second floor, so from where we currently were, a large range of vision over the field was easily accessible, but close enough to see their exposed upper bodies as they caught and passed a football methodically. I noticed 3 things. To begin with, it was the same crowd whose class 1 regrettably ran in yesterday, the failures who got kicked out or suspended. On impulse, I searched for a certain someone and without difficulty, I spotted Uchiha Sasuke. And he had on a shirt. The second thing I noticed. I felt something in my chest, as though it suddenly was dragged down, disappointment. Not all of them in the field had been shirtless, so they were probably playing on teams of shirts and skins. Lastly, I noticed how Ino and I had both been staring out the window without any exchanged dialogues for the past uncounted minutes. We would have looked like utter stalkers if it weren't for the amount of other girls watching the same way we did. Even the smart university-tracked girls stole glances as they walked past. And we'd probably continue staring if Naruto's obnoxious voice hadn't boomed in our ears. They're not that good looking. He pouted. Ino scuffed, finally tearing her eyes off the window pane. Like you have nothing to show. A grin broke out of his pretty face. 6-pack, baby. Ino laughed. You wish. He actually sorta does. Ino stopped laughing and turned to me. And how would you know? Swimming. Last summer. Naruto's grin widened. Awesome. Sakura was checking me out. Before I had a chance to retort back, he cried out while his index finger stuck out hovering in mid-air, "Holy crap. That's Hinata." Ino and I instantly turned towards the field where Naruto pointed at. "Idiot," Ino said, "that's a guy." I gave a quick once-over on the said individual playing football along with the others in the field. "It's a girl." 10-10. Ino called out at the brunette that had just walked by. Dragging her closer to us, along with Hinata who was walking with her, Ino, while pointing, blurted, "Is that a boy or girl?" She examined him, her, Hinata. "She's right beside you. And Hinata's got short hair. This dude's hair is long. Long, straight and pretty. It's a girl, Ino." I told her. "Maybe he's gay," 10-10 stated hesitantly. "Maybe he has not yet gone through puberty. When he does, he will mature and finally look like a grown young man of youth." There was no question who said it, Rock Lee, who had suddenly closed in behind our backs. Everyone turned and gave him the what the hell look he frequently received. Gee guys," said Hinata, who'd been quiet throughout the conversation. "That's my cousin, and Neji. He's a b-boy." We all fell into silence, that is, until Ino blurted, "But is he gay?" Hey, hag. Oh my god. Were my eyes tricking me? I wished they were great, and even blinked a couple times to see if this was only an illusion. To my dismay, it wasn't. There, before me, the nameless jerk still sat unmoving on the once empty chair beside mine, instead of him disappearing when blinked as I hoped he would. I groaned loudly, "Great, it's you again. Hey, I'm not exactly thrilled to see you either." "Good," I stated, slopping down on my designated chair, "at least we got one thing in common." "So what the heck are you doing here? Why is he here, sitting like an average student when he obviously, supposedly, is not? I mean, wasn't he part of those failure guys that was said to be in whichever program our school had been supporting? If he was so, then, that means he's like Sasuke." I noticed another unfamiliar individual sitting on the opposite corner of the room, another one of the failures, and really getting used to calling them that. It's fitting. Again, I wondered, why the heck were they here? This is one of my electives. That didn't really answer my question. "Wow," I said with mock astonishment, "I never considered you as the artsy type. Can't we just call it a truce? You aren't holding some kind of grudge 'cause I called you a hag the other day, are you? From what I recall, you called me that a minute ago." He shrugged, and muttered something that wasn't supposed to reach my ears, although it did anyway. "It's not like I'm lying or anything." I glared daggers. You. "Settle down, Sakura. Kurenai you," he called out from her desk. Defeated, I slumped on my seat. Sad as it was, none of my friends who were actually of use and fun were in this class, except for Lee, who unfortunately sat in the very same table I did and would not shut up about his adolescent crap, and Choji, whose ill-mannered masticates were deafening. Despite that we clearly planned on choosing the same elective courses before summer began, my so-called girlfriends decided otherwise at the last minute. Hinata went into foods, 10-10 in technical studies, and Ino in clothing and textiles, leaving me abandoned and alone in visual arts 11. "You know, hag, you haven't told me your name yet." Without casting a glance, I replied, not really planning to. "And I'd prefer for you not to call me a hag." "Okay, then, ugly." I bit my lip before anything barbaric came out. The boy, on the other hand, merely gave a strange smile. It appeared blank and meaningless, dead on the inside. How strange, indeed, I thought, observing. "I'm not going to stop talking until I get a name," he whispered from behind me. "How flattering is it that you insist so much on meeting me?" I remarked sarcastically. "Who wouldn't with a girl like you?" He replied, playing along. "I thought you said I was ugly." "I know," he replied smugly, and then smiled. "But opposites attract." I narrowed my eyes, yet there was nothing to stop the amused smile from tugging on the corner of my lips, causing my supposed glare to result into something more playful than loathing. Charming, I said, mockery dripping off every syllable. I know I am. And conceited. He grinned. I know that, too. Please refrain from distracting her any further. Oh, that voice, that tone, that choice of words, it was unmistakably Lee. You guys are noisy. The standard sound of crisp shortly followed Choji's remark. Oh, I apologize. The boy smiled again, politely, but just as Choji rummaged through his bag of chips, he muttered, fat ass. Please just let Sakura sketch peacefully and express her inner youth without being interrupted. And oh how I refrained from smacking the youth out of this guy. The boy laughed lightly, shallowly, and turned towards me. All right, since you're all ganging up on me, I'll stop bothering you. He paused. Sakura. I raised an eyebrow. He continued, the name's Sai. I rolled my eyes. Great. Class went by. And Sai stared at me. For the whole time, with his expression blank. You can say that I was more or less freaked out by the act. Did he not know that he was being obvious? Or was he doing that to make me feel uncomfortable, on purpose? That jerk. Sakura, the boy, Sai, called out as I made my way to the door when the bell rang. A pleasure meeting you, he whispered in my ear, unbelievably close considering I had only met him. I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe. Tomorrow. Yeah, he replied, falling pace beside me. Probably. So you go to school here now? Sai shrugged. No, well, not really. Sometimes. I frowned. What did that mean? Uchiha Sasuke and his henchmen weren't in school the next day, nor the day after that. I caught a glimpse of them on the weekend while in Ino's dad's car as he drove us to the mall. As we passed by, I saw the guys scattered in the small park across the rec center. Monday came regularly and they were back. Except for that fact, my morning classes were the usual. And for that reason, never would I have expected to find myself standing stiff and alone before a giant black dog, showing off its sharpened fangs, teeth that would easily slice through any human flesh. It was near the end of lunch, right after I parted from Ino and them, when the sounds of high-spirited barks derived from the grass field behind the auditorium building, drawing me into a short alley that led out to the big field. A minute later, I was standing in front of a monstrous animal that, if upright, would have probably been as tall as I was, if not taller. Now on all fours, the dog reached above my waist. Carefully, I backed away. The demon, or dog, they were basically synonyms in this case, sensed the slight action, and made a sound that most people would describe as barking. But this wasn't any ordinary arf arf or bow wow. No, this sound was a thunder that just happened to erupt from a canine throat. I jumped, and the dog sensed that too. Within a second, the animal broke in a sprint. I screamed at the same time someone shouted, Oreo. Sit. Miraculously the dog sat, settling itself to merely snarling. But its chase for me was over and that alone was relieving enough. A chain leash snapped its collar. With the dog now restrained, I dared to look at it. It was a Siberian husky, I recognized, but God, it resembled more like a wolf than a dog. As I looked further up to see who had been the savior, my stomach tightened. There, knelt down beside the husky, was Uchiha Sasuke looking up at me. Sakura, hey, he greeted me, immediately recognizing who I was. Sorry about that. He got away from me. The dog produced a thunder-sounding bark once more, and I jumped. Sit. Sasuke held a firm grasp on the leash as the dog tugged forcefully at it, and his biceps visibly tightened when he pulled the animal back. I could only hope he was as strong as he looked. Easy, it's okay, he said, speaking to the dog as he scratched its ear, she's a friend. I blinked. Come again, I'm a what? And you too, relax. He spoke almost teasingly. Don't worry, he wouldn't have bitten you. Yes, I'm sure, I thought sarcastically. Is he your dog? Kind of. Yeah, but not really. I saw him hesitate. It's complicated. What's so complicated about answering a simple yes or no question? It's Hitaki's, he reasoned, still unsure, technically. But I'm sort of taking care of Oreo in the meantime. He's babysitting a dog. I thought stupidly. In a desperate attempt to avoid another one of those awkward silences that seemed to always be present between him and me, I said, so, Oreo. Nice name. Once again, I felt stupid. But he replied with a proud look on his face, I named him Oreo, 'cause of his color. Uchiha Sasuke named the dog by its color, named it Oreo, for Christ's sake. What was the world turning into? I'm Sasuke, by the way, he said rather awkwardly. I told you the dog's name but I didn't tell you mine. Kind of stupid of me, huh? I gave a small nod but remained silent. So did Asuma mark you late the other day? No, thanks to you. I totally forgot about taking the note from Sir Kakashi. But then again I couldn't. Kakashi had already dumped the books in my hands before I could take it. After that I was too busy balancing a dozen books all at once. Crap, I was babbling, again. Sasuke smirked. As I reckon, I was the one who carried all the books. You didn't even try to get the books back. Even if I did, you wouldn't have let me since you were too busy showing off. His laughter was cut short when someone wailed from afar. Sasuke. Standing several yards away was the four-eyed girl, poised with both hands on hips on the end of the pathway. She frowned at the displeasure of seeing me. Sasuke. She yelled louder and held up a dog's leash in the air, help me with this leash. It's so confusing. Oh, please. She might as well have been in a skating rink seducing some guy to tie the laces for her because it was so totally confusing. Her cry for help couldn't sound any more fake. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Sasuke shaking his head in a frustrated manner. But when he turned to me and stared, his frown deepened. Sasuke, came the whining voice. He sighed sharply, listen, I know I already asked, but… Sasuke. I'm coming, Karen. He yelled frustrated and then looked back at me in an analyzing manner, you sure we haven't met before? No. I didn't hesitate. I would have remembered. Suddenly, he grinned, just about looking flattered. Really? I flushed. Wait. No, I mean. Hey, it's fine. He was still grinning. I know what you mean, I think. Uchiha Sasuke. Come here now. He squirmed. Then, glancing at me, he forced a smile. Sometimes, I feel like I'm the dog, you know. You should probably go, I said, if you still want your head attached to your body. He smirked, yeah. He paused for a moment. I feel like I know you. He chuckled nonchalantly, weird, huh? Yeah, I said, weird. Not really, I thought as he walked away. In fact, it wasn't weird at all. Underscore. How sad is it to see you sitting here by yourself, all alone? I stopped mid-sketch and looked up to see the speaker. A second ago, I was settled peacefully alone in one of the many garden benches scattered on the edges of the school courtyard where I've been since halfway through lunch. A second after, I found my prior peace rudely disturbed and invaded by a smiling jerk named Sai. I scoffed, is that some kind of pickup line you got from flirtingfordummies.com as a way to tell me you want to sit down? No, it's to tell you that you look like a complete loner at the moment. I have friends, unlike you. I just want to be alone right now. He sat down beside me. Did you just miss the part where I want to be alone right now? Usually, when a person wants to be left alone, it's when they need people the most. He explained nonchalantly. Where'd you get that from? Counselingfordummies.com. Nah, just some counselor who's a dummy. You go to our school counselors. How lame is that? Very. But I had to. They made me. I was just about to ask when he said, don't ask. Forget it. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Sai stared off into the stunning landscape of the school courtyard, while I, on the other hand, stared at him, realizing that he looked a lot like Sasuke. Both are rather cute. Actually, both are very cute. Suddenly, he turned to look at me, then grinned, "See something interesting?" I realized then that I'd been staring, and for how long, I dreaded to know. I snapped, "Something ugly, yeah. Ah, you must have looked into a mirror." I scoffed. Sai then glanced over my shoulder, and raised an eyebrow. "What? Gaara's staring at you." "Who?" I whipped my head around and saw the redhead freaky-looking guy from the cafeteria, looking right back at me all the way across the garden. I frowned. He was staring at the cafe too, the other day. "Maybe he's appalled by your overly dyed hair," Sai suggested. "It isn't dyed, for your info." I snapped, completely forgetting about Gaara. "It's natural." "Then, man, you're more of a freak than I thought." "Ooh, someone's in trouble," I teased. When a staff calls a student at an uncommon time like lunch or class, and especially if that staff was the school officer, it pretty much meant trouble. Sai shrugged as he got up. "I'll see you tomorrow," he called out as he walked away. "If Morino doesn't murder me."